Today, we are honored to have a luminary who's left an indelible mark on various sectors over the past 2 decades. From steering the helm of DPS Skis during unprecedented challenges, to championing the entrepreneurial spirit in upstate New York, and even co-founding a church. Alex Adema, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Tony. I'm glad to be here with you. I appreciate you including me in this. This is really fun.
Awesome. As we've gotten to know each other over the past 5 or 6 years now, I've never asked you, Alex, what was your entry point to loving the outdoors, which led you to becoming part of the industry?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. It helps me kind of reminisce quite a bit, actually. But I think like many, it just started in childhood with just hobbies and pursuits, things that we did as a family when I was young, growing up in upstate New York. But, from an industry perspective, my first foray was being a shop kid at 14 in a little place called the Ski Depot in Ellicottville, New York. And that definitely emanated from this involvement I have with ski racing. So very humble ski racing roots. I'm actually sitting in Park City now where there's people that are just amazing and world-class skiers and all that. But for me, it was, just middle school, high school, but it was that camaraderie of being a part of that team, the competition, the travel, the fun of all that, that really fueled the passion for that. And getting to do a couple of trips out west over the years with my family and sort of being exposed to big mountain skiing and all of that sort of all, weaves the passion together, for me. But yeah, it was starting out as a shop kid in the early days at the Ski Depot. And, I don't know how people were willing to trust a 14-year-old kid with making such big, important purchases, but they did. And it was a great experience for me and just always fueled that. So even going into different things after school, that's where it all started from for me.
I love it. I love hearing when people started in the actual shop itself, whether it's the cycling or skiing or surfing. When you and your family traveled out west, what was the location? What was the mountains that you first started skiing on?
Yeah, it varied. Our first sort of entree into this when we were younger was actually more like the Adirondacks and, Killington, okay. Those types of places. I have a great picture of, for me, it's a great picture of, just racing a little NASCAR track, like when I was like 6 years old with, my mop head, toe head kind of thing going on. And, but when we got older, we got to travel out and go to places like Jackson. And, one of my most vivid memories, I still have a very clear picture of this, is skiing at Alta with my brothers and my dad. And I was probably 7 or 8, maybe 9 at the time. I can't remember exactly. But even today, now that I ski there with my kids, it's kind of surreal to, this is the place we would vacation, very seldomly and just have these epic memories. And now to kind of be there on a weekend basis. And I don't exactly know where that picture is, but there's so many places at Alta that, sort of bring that out every time I'm up there. So it's pretty neat to have that, the tie to the roots from the early days.
Some of my best memories were, I'm from the Midwest also. And the first place that I had ever skied alpine was North Star in Tahoe. And then my family started going to Salt Lake City, or I guess up to Park City, and then also to Alta. But it was memories that I have. And when I go back, it is, like you said, it's surreal. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Alex, it's well known how difficult it is to compete as a U.S. manufacturing company, especially in the hard goods space. What have those challenges been like for DPS over the years? And what I'm really curious is how you overcame that, especially with the adversity of all the economic challenges over the past 4 years. Manufacturing, manufacturing, supply chain, economic headwinds.
Yes. Yeah. There's certainly lots of stories of many brands that have just had, amazing roots and really cool origin stories, but have struggled to make that work over time. And DPS is no stranger to those challenges, to be sure. And for my role at DPS, I was with DPS for the last 8 years. And, I stand on the shoulders of others that have come before me. So we have some really amazing visionary founders that kind of got things going and have sort of fought the long battle to try and start onshoring. Probably around 2010, the company was founded in 2005. And, honestly, it's been an uphill struggle ever since then to figure out how to run a U.S. manufacturing business with such a difficult seasonal cash flow, cyclical nature in a financially sustainable way. So, yeah, to your point, it is not an easy equation to sort of solve year in and year out, especially for a brand that's growing and trying to expand internationally. It requires a lot to sort of make a name for yourself around the world, and it's tough to do. And particularly in the last 4 years, when you're starting from sort of that foundation of financial sustainability being the initial goal, but then you layer in, the COVID challenges and the supply chain crisis of the last couple of years, and inflation and all of those things. It's been really a wild and grinding road for sure. And what fuels that is just the shared camaraderie and passion among a team of people that just love the sport. They love what we do. There's certainly just this innate sort of excitement about manufacturing in the US that kind of helps people drive forward. But at the end of the day, we're also a manufacturing business, and trying to make that work and support raw materials and just paying people, big factory, all that kind of stuff is really a difficult thing to kind of sort out year after year in a growth mode. So to your point, it's not been easy. It's not for the faint of heart, but the passion for what we do is really what fuels it for the whole team.
Well, it certainly is probably the most seasonal sector in the outdoor and sporting goods industry.
Sure.
And one of the ways I know that you had shared with me in the past that you helped bridge this gap at times was, during your tenure at DPS Skis, we saw a very disruptive technology that you were involved with called Phantom. It's a product line that you started. My understanding, it was a highly successful Kickstarter campaign. Alex, can you share the inspiration behind the Phantom line, and how did the Kickstarter campaign play a role in a successful introduction to the market?
Yeah, no, it was a really amazing, exciting learning experience. One of our founders, Stefan Drake, really a visionary guy. Many people know him in the industry for sure. He's done some just awesome things in terms of leading DPS, and he had this idea, and he likes to tell the story about how his mom actually was the one that sort of seeded that in him. Like, could something like this work for skis to have this sort of permanent solution? So we worked with a company actually out of Europe for a time to see if maybe they were onto something that would work for us, and it just simply wasn't something that was going to be sort of what we were after in the end. So we started working with the University of Utah and some of the PhD chemists there, and developed through an R&D program with them this product called Phantom that began to actually show some marketability and some commercialization, sort of viability. And in that process, we decided that we would launch it and sort of make a name for it with a Kickstarter program. So as something we'd never done before, it was a totally different type of manufacturing and production process than building skis. You're working with chemists and chemistry and beakers and all that kind of stuff is just totally different, of course, than working with carbon fiber composites on the ski side. And what Kickstarter did was really allow us to sort of see if there's a market appetite for it, and then also work through a lot of the challenges. So it was really exciting. We more than blew away our goals in terms of what the revenues would be from that. But then it was a matter of, how do we now build all this stuff, get it out to customers on time for this season, and then sort of after the fact, the learning process of the way people, it was a DIY, do-it-yourself program early on, and there's much room for interpretation of that. So it was really great to learn from that process, but also really quite an uphill battle to sort of refine what that would look like and make the customer happy and iterate on that quickly enough so that the product really gained credibility in the marketplace. So the Kickstarter program was amazing to just get that out there quickly and get tons of customer feedback, and also just a lot of attention and excitement around the product. So it was really, really a unique way to go about it, and an amazing way to iterate on the development process in a hurry.
Was there ever an inflection point where you and the team, you knew right then and there that you had traction or anti-traction for that matter? What was the point when you were like, we're onto something?
Yeah, it was actually before the Kickstarter program. It was when we had worked with this other product initially the year before, and basically we do a Dreamtime sale every summer. We call it Dreamtime, okay. And the idea is to for us bring in some cash flow in the doldrum summer months when we're really kind of struggling to make that work throughout that time period. But also it's an opportunity for us as a ski company to sort of have the marketing voice in the industry when no other ski companies are sort of making noise at that time. So we launched this other product and saw there was just a really strong appetite for customers to have some kind of permanent solution and alternative option to traditional ski waxes, and something that was more environmentally friendly. So yeah, it was actually that predecessor to Phantom that we knew that there was something there, and that's what kind of gave us the excitement and the enthusiasm to kind of go after this in a more serious way.
Okay, because I was imagining in my mind, was it like a Clark Griswold moment where someone just
Yes.
goes flying down the hill and you're like, we've got it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, lots of references to Christmas Vacation over the years. That's for sure.
I am sure.
Yeah.
So I know that something else that you led the charge on was building out the construction of a 20,000 foot manufacturing facility in downtown Salt Lake City. During that process, what was one of the most critical decisions that you had to make sure this would be successful?
Yeah, I think, the biggest challenge with that was when to do it. Because from a hard goods manufacturing standpoint, we're not building small widgets that we can quickly do high volumes of. We really need a steady flow of production throughout the year. And so for us, it was really never an opportune time to have downtime. So I think the biggest decision for us was sort of figuring out when it was that we needed to pull the trigger on that. And at the same time, you're also really not in control of that. For us, we're dealing with landlords on both sides of it, sort of moving out of our older facility and moving into the new, bigger facility and trying to get machines moved over and flow working out and power hooked up and all of the kind of things that have to go into that. And that was sort of the biggest challenge for sure, is just, what does it look like to actually make that transition, go into downtime, and then really not know, you have your hopes and best wishes for how fast you can get up and running. But realistically, like what other things that would run into that we didn't know we would be facing. So that was a huge challenge, really a big undertaking. And of course, you're playing a bit of catch up after that, because in our case, I don't remember the exact days, but certainly it took longer than we expected, and you uncover things that you didn't know would be issues. We moved into an old building that was being sort of retrofitted for what we were doing. So inherently in that, you're not working with a nice, new, clean, stand-up, warehouse type of building, but you're dealing with some of those older things as well. So that was an interesting aspect of that as well.
Were the machines, did you move the machines that you already had, or was there more capital investment and more machines? What was the actual machine layout of the facility?
Yeah, it was both. So yeah, we definitely moved over everything that we did have, but a big part and reason for our move was to be able to do more vertical integration. So previously, we've designed all of our own parts, but we've had to outsource the production of some of those. For example, like wood cores, our sidewalls, and our top sheets. And so a big part of this move that we had undertaken was to be able to have more capacity and ability to do more vertical integration, so that we could do that in-house. We could have more control over the production process. We could have less lead times in terms of working with vendors and things like that. So yeah, there was some capital investment that went with that as well, in terms of investing in new machines. And yeah, some of the stuff was easy to move over. We work with a lot of typical sort of back of shop, Wintersteiger, ski tuning equipment, but then we also have some pretty heavy duty CNC machines that require, getting a crane and lifting companies to come and make that work. So coordinating all of that was a huge team effort. We have a really amazing group of manufacturing engineers and others just across the factory team that jumped in. It was sort of all hands on deck and planning that out. And yeah, again, you do your best from a lean manufacturing standpoint to imagine what the flow will be in your new space, especially with new processes like wood cores and top sheets that you've never done before. But then, of course, you just have to learn over time and be able to adapt and adjust. But yeah, it was definitely a long iterative process that required, some amount of just moving over what we had, but also adding new capital and new processes to the flow.
What would you say, like, total time that when you started the move until you started to the very beginning of being able to start production again? How long was that duration?
Gosh, it's hard for me to remember exactly. That was about 4.5 years ago now, but I would say it was probably about 2 months, realistically, in terms of what our actual downtime was. There were certain things that we were able to get up sooner and get up and running, like our ski finishing area, for example. But then some of the other things actually, were phased over time. So we weren't pouring our own sidewalls or doing top sheets right out of the gate. We actually waited a couple of years on those pieces. But in terms of our just kind of basic routine ski manufacturing that we had been doing prior to that, it was about 2 months.
Okay. So interesting. Yeah. So now with that, you've built a team, obviously, with a very authentic culture at DPS Skis. How did the culture that you built impact the performance from the move into back to full production?
Yeah, I mean, and the culture piece, as you know, goes right back to the beginning for us, the founding roots of DPS. It's always just been really authentic and, comes from that passion of just being in the mountains and sharing that experience with other people. So many of the people that we attract from a team perspective have that shared camaraderie, whether they come from like a big mountain, type of experience or a ski racing experience or just something more even humble than either of those two things. There's just that shared appreciation. And, when there's challenges in the labor market, Salt Lake City in particular has extremely low unemployment, even relative to the rest of the country. And this has been true over time. And when we hear about other manufacturing companies and others struggling to find people, that's usually not the case for us. So we're really fortunate from that perspective that, that culture is innate, sort of in the roots of many people that join. And then those that are coming on board often have that experience. Maybe they worked at resorts or ski shops or something along those lines. And so that's always kind of built into it and makes those big heavy lifts like a building move or things that we dealt with in COVID and supply chain. It makes it a little bit easier because everybody's pretty motivated by the same type of passion. So we kind of have a cheat code a little bit from that perspective and a team building and culture, approach to things.
Well, that's interesting. You say that the cheat code. What was the cheat code for powder days?
That's a tricky one for manufacturing in particular, because as we all know, the work from home thing and how that works out over time now with distributed workforces is constantly evolving and changing in the last few years. But when you're a manufacturer, you need to be there in person to build skis. And so you have, kind of a couple elements of what's happening in a ski company from the operations side and marketing and sales to actually hands and feet on the ground, like building the skis and the warehouse and all of it. So it's always a tension in terms of like, what's the right way to go about doing that? So, we've experimented with all kinds of things over time. We've run longer shifts for 4 days and had a day off where people can ski, but it's hard to line up a manufacturing process with powder days. But one way or another, we find a way to do it all the time. But I would like to say that we're super flexible and easy, but it's just difficult from a manufacturing standpoint to make that work really well. But of course, there's always a wish and a hope that people can get time to do that when they want to. And we try and, we've tried over time to like facilitate that when we can, for sure.
I can only imagine. Now, the culture that you built, Alex, tell me one key element that you felt you were able to contribute into the culture which then had a trickle around effect where the team then felt even more cohesive.
Well, I would say in the last 4 years in the role I've been in as the CEO up until kind of this spring when I've transitioned out, it was really around sort of transparency and vulnerability. And I wouldn't say by any means that I perfected it or was, great at it, but that was certainly the approach that we tried to take. The company, like as I mentioned before, has always struggled to find its way to financial sustainability. And there's always some angst around that. What does the future hold? And, are we going to be viable and can we survive this next big challenge, whether it's COVID or supply chain or whatever it might be? And I think the only way to sort of get people bought into that is really being honest with sort of what the state of things are, where we're trying to go, and realize that it's going to take all of us and it is all hands on deck to make it work. So we would regularly try and do things like the kind of all hands meeting at the factory level or wherever that would be throughout the company and try and be really transparent about that. And probably in our case, more transparent than most. And I think that was really vital for what we were trying to do and accomplish. And again, it sort of builds that camaraderie and that buy-in, at least hopefully down to the individual level that everybody sort of rallies together. So yeah, that's been the main thing for us. It's just having that transparency and that vulnerability as much as is reasonable to sort of have people understand what they're all working for and if we're getting there.
All points show that the culture that you helped contribute to and to build there is the testament to the success that the company has had and is continuing to stay in business. And I think that's amazing, Alex.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You make me blush a little bit. I certainly, again, I'm very deferent to not take credit for all of that. We stand on the shoulders of those that have gone before and done some awesome things at DPS, and then an incredible team that I've just been blessed. I mean, truly, I'm surrounded with a lot of people. Well, I have been surrounded, let me just be careful on the past tense of that or present tense, but have been surrounded with people who are way smarter than me. And, I've always looked for expertise and kind of how to move forward. So it is a team culture and a team environment, to be sure.
There's something else I've been wanting to know from you. You had shared with me a while back, during the pandemic, DPS transitioned into making PPE. What was the pivot point? What was the point, that inflection point where you made the decision collectively, it's time to shift what we're doing right at this moment.
Yeah. Well, so in 2019, we had a lot of struggles in terms of the financial viability of the company, and again that summer cash flow, just is really difficult to figure out. And we actually had to furlough our factory for a couple of months during that period as we sort of worked through what that next step would look like in the financing. And that was a really tough time for the team, and a lot of people had to go and find other work as a result of that, just because they couldn't sort of sustain that furlough period. Which was totally understandable. But what it left us with when we did kind of get going in the end there, kind of late August of that year, was, we had a depleted team that we had to restaff and then retrain, which is really critical when you're building a high-end product like we are. It's very hands-on, handcrafted, and, easy to kind of mess up a ski, in the bandsaw or whatever it might be. And so we learned that the hard way, that, losing that time, losing that collective sort of knowledge of the team was really imperative that we not have that happen again when COVID hit. So, a resort shut down in Colorado March 15th of that year. They shut down the next day in Utah, March 16th. And of course, like everybody in every industry, everybody was pretty panicked. And that's why I remember the dates so vividly. What's going to happen? Are a lot of the family-run ski shops going to even, survive this? And if that's the case, are we going to survive this? Because of course, that's who our main partner and customers were. So a lot of talk about, whether we should continue to build skis, whether it was even ethical to ask people to come in and build what were, recreational equipment. It's hard to kind of put yourself back in that mindset, 4 years ago, but it was 3 years ago. It was a really scary time. Like what should we do and what was ethical? And so, what we found though was that we had to get a way through this without sort of sending everybody home and shutting down the factory, because we knew how hard it would be to restart again. And through some amazing relationships we've had here in the state of Utah, through the different economic development partners that we worked with and been supported by over time, and the governor's office here, we actually found a pathway to provide those medical face shields, the plastic ones that sort of went over your face. And
Sure.
that emanated from, looking at everybody converting their factories, hearing stories about World War II, conversions that were happening from manufacturing companies back then. And we were just starting to ask questions. What could DPS do? We have this big static cutting machine that's actually made for the textile industry that we use to cut our base material and fiberglass and other things. And we were just asking ourselves, could we do N95 masks? We realized that we didn't have the sewing capacity to do that. And there was a bunch of other kind of things in the way, but our team of really smart engineers figured out a way that we could do the very simple product of the medical face shields. And we found an open source design for that. I think it was out of maybe one of the schools, the universities in Oregon or something. But we did a couple of prototypes and found a need at the state. And we did a couple of orders, maybe for 5,000 or 6,000 units. Once we sort of demonstrated our ability to do that, they doubled down, and we ended up producing 80 or 90,000 units. And the point of all that was we didn't make barely any margin or any actual profit off of that, but we were allowed to keep our payroll going, keep our rent paid, and learn that we could operate safely. We really had nobody get seriously sick during that time. And then as things sort of sifted out over the next couple of months, we realized there was going to be this movement towards outdoor activities, skiing and hiking and climbing and all of that, and that the shops were actually going to do pretty well. So we didn't send the team home. We didn't have to retrain. We didn't have to bring everybody back. We just sort of finished that project for the Department of Health, and then we were able to go right into making skis, and actually did pretty well that year. So, it came from the hard trials that we had the year before, and having a furlough and seeing what it would take to avoid shutting down, because we knew the detriment that would be. So it's just, again, one of those points there where everybody rallied together, and no one person was sort of responsible for any of it. It was truly a team effort of people just grinding out and sort of digging deep for that camaraderie to figure out how we were going to survive this together. It's pretty remarkable and amazing experience to be a part of. And one other thing I want to mention in that is we were really fortunate. A bunch of our other outdoor partners in town here, Petzel was one of them, Goal Zero was another, and a couple others among them, jumped in and helped. Some donated money. Petzel donated the headbands for their headlamps. It was a really cool thing to be a part of, and sort of that outdoor community rallied around that project, and it was super fun to be a part of in hindsight.
That is super cool to hear how the other brands in your neighborhood came, and I guess that's where what I'm curious is how did that connection get made? Was it because they were aware of what you were doing, or was there some sort of forum that the businesses and brands were talking about in Salt Lake City, around the area, of what to do in this situation when no one really knew exactly what was going on or what to do?
Yeah, I think it's true in a lot of communities. Like there was a lot of like, what can we all do together kind of mentality. For us, we're part of this nascent group called the Utah Outdoor Association. There's also the Utah Offices of Outdoor Recreation. So there's a lot of sort of connections and ties there. And of course, the ecosystem is, a tight-knit community to begin with. But I will say in those cases, they were actually inbound calls. So people heard what we were doing, particularly at Petzel and Goal Zero, and were inbound calling saying, what can we do to help? And there were more as well that wanted to. We couldn't find the right place to plug in everybody that wanted to help. But those two in particular were just easy ones to jump in. And yeah, they were just like, we want to be a part of this. We don't care if we make any money. We're just here to be a part of the solution. So it was pretty wild and pretty rewarding, to experience that. And that camaraderie that I keep referring to on the team side also exists, I think, in our ecosystem in the outdoor industry, which is really, really rewarding to be a part of.
That is, it's amazing. It's one of the reasons that I personally love the outdoor industry so much. Is it really is a community. It's a community of like-minded individuals. And hearing your story, Alex, or hearing the story of DPS creating the face shields and Petzel donating the headbands and Goal Zero contributing into it, like that, to me, that is just one of the many reasons that I think this is the greatest industry to be involved with in existence.
Yeah. No, there's a lot to that for sure.
Let me ask you this. So you running a business, you're on the board for the Utah Outdoor Association, you're advisory members to other boards, including the Women's Leadership Institute in Utah. You have a lot going on, Alex. What do you physically do to balance the demands of high stress corporate leadership and all this volunteer activity that you're putting forth to help your community in Salt Lake City?
Yeah, I just think it's really important to be an active part of our community. We have been the benefactors of a region, and whether it's the outdoor industry or just the state of Utah in general has been really supportive of what DPS Skis has been trying to do over time. And they know what it means for our workforce and sort of creating jobs here at the very basic level. And so they've always been very supportive of that. And part of my sort of engagement with the community has been to look for those types of resources. I come from an organization called Launch New York before this, which was a venture development organization in the economic development space in upstate New York. And I was very acquainted with sort of what these resources could do for companies. So there's things like the Manufacturing Extension Partnership, the World Trade Centers. There's different sort of organizations, the Utah Office of Outdoor Recreation, that can help in various ways, whether it's just getting connected with other suppliers or partners, or people that are in markets that you're trying to get into. It could be grant funding, whatever that might be. So there's kind of two sides to that coin. One is to make sure to be engaged, to be aware and understand when those things are coming along, or where you can tap into, just so you don't know what you don't know aspect of things. And then on the flip side of that, I think it's really important then to give back. So you're the benefactor of those resources, and you also need to find a place where you can be a contributor as well. And sort of the rising tide lifts all ships mentality. It's very basic, but I think it's really important to not just be a taker, but also to be a contributor. And you mentioned Women's Leadership Institute. That one in particular has been an amazing resource for us. Just from a manufacturing standpoint, some of the DEI sort of goals and particularly like gender equity and sort of balance in our company is one thing that we could really use some work on, because in a manufacturing setting that is usually even more challenged. And so they have been great contributors to us in helping us cultivate an environment that is rewarding for everybody who works there. And so again, there's just another opportunity to sort of give back. And we have viewed that as a chance to sort of give voice to the Women's Leadership Institute in the outdoor industry, where there wasn't much engagement, at least in that organization, prior to our participation. Maybe I think Cotopaxi was the other one in town here that was involved. So there's both sides of the coins in terms of the resources that come from those things, the relationships, the you don't know what you don't know things, and then really important to just give back and be a contributing member of that community as well. So whatever it might be in those trade associations is really I think important to be a part of it at any level of leadership, really.
Yeah, it's an overall testament to community involvement and wanting to progress and to help other organizations and individuals. I think what you're doing is amazing. So that leads me to the question. So what do you do when you're playing and you're not sitting on one of your boards, you're not running a company, you've got a little bit of time just to yourself? What do you do?
Well, I got a youngish family. They're not feeling that young anymore. I've got 3 girls in middle school, high school age now, and a little boy behind them. So it's it's a lot of kind of chasing them around, sports they're involved in and whatnot. But yeah, whenever we can in the winter, if I'm not at the hockey rink, we're, or at the volleyball court or something like that, we're out skiing as much as possible. In the summer, it's hiking. So, I kind of try and plan my meetings as I'm going kind of through my business this summer with, can I jump off and do a quick trail run here or trail hike there? And, it actually took me a while to adapt and figure out how to do that well, because we still are sort of a bigger city. And so you're not like right in the mountains like you are, in a smaller setting like a steamboat or something like that. But yeah, that's what we like to do. In the winter, it's skiing. In the summer, it's hiking, and, kind of travel and everything that kind of goes along with those things are always the fun things to be a part of. So that's what sort of the hobbies are for me, at least.
And you're a hockey parent, which I had hockey parents. So
I
might be biased, but I would say that hockey parents are some of the most dedicated parents on earth, because of the early mornings, cold rinks, smelly gear, hauling kids from it's a lot. That's pretty cool.
Well, so I just one point on that. So during COVID, they moved they moved all the aerobic equipment from this one rec center out on the stands above the rink. And it was my help in getting my COVID-19 off. Was I was at those early practices, instead of sitting in the stands sort of eating my breakfast or snacks or whatever, I realized I can just hit the treadmill and actually watch practice. So that was actually one of the great benefits, was being at those early practices 3 days a week. I was actually able to get myself in pretty good shape during that time. So it actually worked out pretty good.
That's incredible. That's the first time I've heard anyone say they took the fitness equipment inside an arena. The parents could work out while their child was participating in the activity or sport. That's incredible.
I think we need to find a way to capitalize on that.
That's amazing. Alex, I talk to executives throughout the industry almost every single day, and a few things that I believe right now that are evolving in the outdoor and sporting goods industry, for that matter, is I think there's going to be fewer mass products. I think with the inventory glut, I'm hearing more and more conversation about having fewer SKUs in 2024. Maybe this is the path going forward. One of the most common things that these conversations are centered around is, not going to surprise anyone who may listen to this, and certainly not to you, is the increased sustainability, right? It's more community thinking is what's going on. Right now, this inventory glut, it still exists, it's receding, and there's going to be more oxygen. I'm curious, from your standpoint, if you think about what you've seen over the past 3 or 4 years, what do you see as an evolution maybe in 2024 for the outdoor industry and the brands and companies that exist inside it?
Yeah, I think for sure what I'm finding now is what you said. Yeah, everybody's kind of dealing with this inventory whiplash that happened, where couldn't get their hands on things, and then overordered, and now everybody's kind of dealing with that. And we're finding, like, even in Salt Lake, for example, like Purple is based here, the mattress company, or Traeger grills, and all these sort of consumer products that really benefited from that are trying to sort that out. And so, but I think that the general consensus is that it will sort of reset itself, but we have a little ways to go in terms of like getting to that point. And that puts a strain on everybody in terms of like really, finding financial sustainability, which is a really important foundation, at least for a company like DPS, where you're sort of always trying to make ends meet every year, to focus on things like environmental sustainability. But there are a lot of really encouraging projects, including things that DPS is doing, and many other ski manufacturers and hard goods products, in terms of trying to find more sustainable ways to, skis in particular is one that's a really difficult product to recycle. And so finding ways to do that, and there's sort of a lot of collective thought about trying to, but certainly nobody has sort of cracked that nut yet. So I think more and more energy and effort around that type of thing. And the other thing that has been really standing out to me is, the idea of sort of repurposing product. And I think a lot of companies are making moves towards either just finding ways to repair and get it out of the market. Of course, there's that's not too new, but also sort of like operating on a consignment basis. So, if there's existing product that's in the marketplace, bring it in, refurbish, get it back out in the community at a lower price, sort of give people access to your brand. And then, maybe they become brand loyalists over time. And so there's commercial benefits to that, as well as environmentally sustainable benefits. And I think a lot more of that is going to happen in terms of, getting more repurposing and sort of upcycling of existing product in the marketplace, as opposed to just sort of always hucking as much gear as we possibly can out into the world.
Yeah, I think what you just said about the gear repair shops, right? Some of the companies have been doing this for a long time. I remember, gosh, it was probably maybe 20 years ago. I had a black diamond tent that I had set up and gone out on a mountain bike ride. Didn't realize that I had left a box of all things that I would never like. I'd left a box of animal crackers in the tent, and I came back. I came back in my brand new, super light black diamond tent. The corner was completely eaten through. Animal crackers completely gone. It was a long mountain bike ride, but I don't know if it took this animal, whether it was a possum or raccoon, that long to get through it. But I shipped it back to Park City and fixed back to me. Never missed a beat with it. So companies and brands that have been doing that, and there has been some shops over the years, but seeing more of these shops and the consignment idea that you talked about, I think is absolutely, it's amazing. I think it's critical. It's one thing about, living down here is I don't have access to as much or the ability to get things as quickly. So I have started to repair so much more of my own stuff. And obviously my surfboards are something that, I've learned over, I don't want to tell you how many dings and cracks and broken rails that I've had from carrying the board in and out of the property or down to the beach. But learning to fix it on my own, where in the past I would probably have just purchased a new one. And so I hope more people, and that's the community thinking I was talking about. I hope that this continues to pick up in momentum. So
sure. Yeah. I had visited one of our distributors in Germany last year. I think, it was in Germany, and it was pretty cool. We went into one of the main shops there, very well-known shop, and right outside was a brand out of Scandinavia that had a tent set up, and they were doing mending for their products. And it was cool because it was in partnership with the retail location that, was potentially losing a sale because they weren't going to sell something new. And there was a free repair happening. So it wasn't even like they were getting, a fee for that. So it was really interesting, and kind of turned on a lot of light bulbs for me in terms of what that could look like. And it is attention, because even outdoor product companies, sort of need to feed their families, and it's all motivated by good things in terms of wanting to grow revenues and be profitable and, provide for families and, be contributors to community. At the same time, you have this tension of like not wanting to put more plastic and just consumables into the world. So, I've always wrestled with that at the trade shows in particular. There's a lot that goes into that, a lot of tchotchkes, lots of carpet, lots of whatever that goes into trade shows. Yet at the same time, it's a good and sort of noble like community and cause to be behind and sort of supporting families and in the ecosystem in general. So anyways, I don't know if that is making sense, but there's just always this tension I feel like that we exist in as outdoor companies that are so generally focused on being more sustainable, yet at the same time, wanting to grow our businesses at the same time. It's a really interesting dichotomy.
It is. And I do believe that awareness takes time. As we grow, as we're more educated, the awareness increases. And with more awareness, more of these ways to recycle products or use less waste, or the removal of forever chemicals is becoming more prevalent. And which is a sign that we, as a community or as a species, we're becoming more aware. So Alex, we're nearing the end, and I have two questions I want to ask you. Looking back right now, what piece of advice would you give yourself at the beginning of your career with what you know right now?
It's interesting because, I've done a lot of different things from like an industry vertical standpoint. I actually cut my teeth early on in the banking world. I did a couple of not-for-profit startups. I worked for, venture development organization. Then like ski industry has been manufacturing and all these other things. So I ask myself all the time, like if I would do it differently. But it's interesting because all of those things build on each other. Like it's not been reinventing myself. I think one thing in particular though was sort of looking back and wishing I had not held on in certain places so long. Just because they felt like they were sort of like the banking job in particular is one of the ones that feels like, gosh, I've got this kind of great setup and this thing that a lot of people would like to have. I should sort of let go of it. But I wasn't pursuing my passions there. I was learning and had great people that I was surrounded by. But that's one thing that I've learned. And that sort of is what partly precipitated a lot of the other kind of big risks I've taken in terms of, next career steps that also included risks for my family too. So that was a key piece of sort of like hanging on too long at one point and realizing that I was becoming really stale and sort of wasn't doing something that has a passion behind it. And that piece is really important. And the other one is I was fortunate to have a mentor that taught me this early on, and it's not novel or anything you haven't heard, but you don't know what you don't know. And that goes back to sort of your question about like being involved in the community and different, trade associations, whatever it might be, is just really focus and be intentional about finding out what you don't know. And just growing from it and being ready for the trials, because that's where you really grow, is through those trials rather than sort of the predictable sort of nature of things. So I don't know if that's concise enough of an answer for you, but yeah, it's not hanging on too long at a place where you're just sort of there because it's easy. And then the other is just making sure to find out what you don't know, and finding active ways to do that.
I think those are great pieces of advice to give anyone. Thank you for sharing those, Alex.
Sure.
My last question is this, what would, if you could give one piece of advice to someone who wants to enter the outdoor industry and start their career, what's that one piece of advice you would give that individual?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Going back to my banking days, it's funny because, having that sort of longing for the mountains that was established early on that we talked about before. I used to sort of fantasize sitting in my banking office about what it might look like to work in the outdoor industry, the winter sports in particular, and skiing, because that was my passion. But I just never understood, how a knucklehead from Buffalo, New York was going to sort of make their way there. But just you never know where opportunity to lead from, and being willing to sort of take a risk and get your foot in the door is really always the key, probably in anything. And I think just being humble and being willing to take roles that maybe aren't like the pinnacle of what you'd want to be doing, but just being willing to sort of learn and get engaged and understand the process and the culture and the team and all those types of things is really important, just to be humble and look for opportunities and then build on those opportunities. But also be ready, always be prepared and ready to sort of seize on them when they come, because I think they say, what is it? That success is where preparation meets opportunity. And it's hard to predict what that would be. But, if this is something that you want to do and be a part of in terms of the outdoor industry, just keep focused on that, keep preparing, and just watch for those opportunities, and being humble and willing to sort of jump in when that thing presents itself.
I think that is really sound advice. And the part that I want to highlight that you said is, when you have that opportunity, it may be different. It may not be exactly what you expect, but once you get that first foot in the door, it opens your eyes to a whole lot more opportunities, and you start to learn and start building your network within the outdoor industry. So that's super great. I appreciate you sharing that with everyone who's going to listen to this, Alex.
Yeah, of course.
So that's the end for today. Alex, thanks so much for joining us. As I sign out here, I just wish that everyone who does get exposure to this, be kind to everyone you see, or as kind as you can be, but especially be kinder to yourself. And I hope everyone has a great day.